Chapter 1. I used to have a cat, an old fighting Tom, who would jump through the open window by my bed in the middle of the night and land on my chest. I'd half awaken. He'd stick his skull under my nose and purr, stinking of urine and blood. Some nights he kneaded my bare chest with his front paws, powerfully arching his back, as if sharpening his claws or pummeling a mother for milk. And some mornings I'd wake in daylight to find my body covered with paw prints and blood. I looked as though I'd been painted with roses. It was hot, so hot the mirror felt warm. I washed before the mirror in a daze. My twisted summer sleep still hung about me like sea kelp. What blood was this, and what roses? It could have been the rose of union, the blood of murder, or the rose of beauty, bare in the blood of some unspeakable sacrifice or birth. The sign of my body could have been an emblem or a stain, the keys to the kingdom or the mark of Cain. I never knew as I washed, and the blood streaked, faded, and finally disappeared, whether I'd purified myself or ruined the blood sign of the Passover. We wake, if we ever wake at all, to mystery, rumors of death, beauty, violence. Seem like we're just set down here, a woman said to me recently, and don't nobody know why. These are morning matters, pictures you dream as the final wave heaves you up on the sand to the bright light and drying air. You remember pressure and a curved sleep you rested against, soft like a scallop in its shell, but the air hardens your skin. You stand, you leave the lighted shore to explore some dim headland, and soon you've lost in a leafy interior, intent, remembering nothing. I still think of that old tomcat mornings when I wake. Things are tamer now. I sleep with the window shut. The cat and our rights are gone and my life has changed, but the memory remains of something powerful playing over me. I wake expectant, hoping to see a new thing. If I'm lucky, I might be jogged awake by a strange bird call. I dress in a hurry, imagining the yard flapping with auks or flamingos. This morning it was a wood duck down at the creek. It flew away. I live by a creek, Tinker Creek, in a valley in Virginia's Blue Ridge. An anchorite's hermitage is called an anchor hold. Some anchor holds were simple sheds clamped to the side of a church, like a barnacle to a rock. I think of this house clamped to the side of Tinker Creek as an anchor hold. It holds me at anchor to the rock bottom of the creek itself, and it keeps me stilled in the current, as a sea anchor does, facing the stream of light pouring down. It's a good place to live. There's a lot to think about. The creeks, Tinker and Carvin's, are an active mystery, fresh every minute. Theirs is the mystery of continuous creation and all that providence implies, the uncertainty of vision, the horror of the fixed, the dissolution of the present, the intricacy of the beauty, the pressure of fecundity, the elusiveness of the free, and the flawed nature of perfection. The mountains, Tinker and Brushy, McAfee's Knob, and Dead Man, are a passive mystery, the oldest of all. Theirs is one simple mystery of creation from nothing, of matter itself, anything at all, the given. Mountains are giant, restful, absorbent. You can heave your spirit into a mountain, and the mountain will keep it folded and not throw it back as some creeks will. The creeks are the world with all its stimulus and beauty. I live there, but the mountains are home. The wood duck flew away. I caught only a glimpse of something like a bright torpedo that blasted the leaves where it flew. Back at the house, I ate a bowl of oatmeal. Much later in the day came the long slant of light that means good walking. If the day is fine, any walk will do. It all looks good. Water in particular looks its best, reflecting blue sky in the flat and chopping it into gravelled shallows and white shoot and foam in the riffles. On a dark day or a hazy one, everything's washed out and lackluster but the water. It carries its own lights. I set out for the railroad tracks, for the hill the flocks fly over, for the woods where the white mare lives, but I go to the water. Today is one of those excellent January partly cloudies in which light chooses an unexpected part of the landscape to trick out in guilt, and then shadow sweeps it away. You know you're alive. You take huge steps trying to feel the planet's roundness arc between your feet. Kazakus says that when he was young, he had a canary in a globe. When he freed the canary, it would perch on the globe and sing. All his life wandering the earth, he felt as though he had a canary on top of his mind singing. West of the house, Tinker Creek makes a sharp loop, so that the creek is both in back of the house, south of me, and also on the other side of the road, north of me. I like to go north. There the afternoon sun hits the creek just right, deepening the reflected blue and lighting the sides of the trees on the banks. Steers from the pasture across the creek come down to drink. I always flush a rabbit or two there. I sit on a fallen trunk in the shade and watch the squirrels in the sun. There are 2 separated wooden fences suspended from cables that cross the creek just upstream from my tree trunk bench. They keep the steers from escaping up or down the creek when they come to drink. Squirrels, the neighborhood children, and I use the downstream fence as a swaying bridge across the creek, but the steers are there today. I sit on the down tree and watch the black steers slip on the creek bottom. They are all bred beef, beef heart, beef hide, beef hocks. They're a human product like rayon. They're like a field of shoes. They have cast iron shanks and tongues like foam insoles. You can't see through to their brains as you can with other animals. They have beef fat behind their eyes, beef stew. I cross the fence 6 feet above the water, walking my hands down the rusty cable and tight roping my feet along the narrow edge of the planks. When I hit the other bank in terra firma, some steers are bunched in a knot between me and the barbed wire fence I want to cross. So I suddenly rush at them in an enthusiastic sprint, flailing my arms and hollering, "Lightning, copperhead, Swedish meatballs!" They flee, still in a knot, stumbling across the flat pasture. I stand with the wind on my face. When I slide under a barbed wire fence, cross a field, and run over a sycamore trunk, felled across the water, I'm on a little island shaped like a tear in the middle of Tinker Creek. On one side of the creek is a steep forested bank. The water is swift and deep on that side of the island. On the other side is the level field I walk through next to the steer's pasture. The water between the field and the island is shallow and sluggish. In summer's low water, flags and bulrushes grow along a series of shallow pools, cooled by the lazy current. Water striders patrol the surface film. Crayfish hump along the silt bottom, eating filth. Frogs shout and glare, and shiners and small bream hide among roots from sulky green heron's eyes. I come to this island every month of the year. I walk around it, stopping and staring, or I straddle the sycamore log over the creek, curling my legs out of the water in winter, trying to read. Today I sit on dry grass at the end of the island, by the slower side of the creek. I'm drawn to this spot. I come to it as an oracle. I return to it as a man years later will seek out the battlefield where he lost a leg or an arm. A couple of summers ago, I was walking along the edge of the island to see what I could see in the water, and mainly to scare frogs. Frogs have an inelegant way of taking off from invisible positions on the bank just ahead of your feet in dire panic, emitting a froggy yike, and splashing into the water. Incredibly, this amused me, and incredibly, it still amuses me. As I walked along the grassy edge of the island, I got better and better at seeing frogs both in and out of the water. I learned to recognize, slowing down, the difference in texture of the light reflected from mudbank, water, grass, or frog. Frogs were flying all around me. At the end of the island, I noticed a small green frog. He was exactly half in and half out of the water, looking like a schematic diagram or an amphibian, and he didn't jump. I crept closer. At last I knelt on the island's winter-killed grass, lost dumbstruck, staring at the frog in the creek just 4 feet away. He was a very small frog with wide, dull eyes, and just as I looked at him, he slowly crumpled and began to sag. The spirit vanished from his eyes as it snuffed. His skin emptied and drooped. His very skull seemed to collapse and settle like a kicked tent. He was shrinking before my eyes like a deflating football. I watched the taut, glistening skin on his shoulders ruck and rumple and fall. Soon, part of his skin, formless as a prick balloon, lay in the floating folds like bright scum on top of the water. It was a monstrous and terrifying thing. I gaped, bewildered, appalled. An oval shadow hung in the water behind the drained frog, and the shadow glided away. The frog skin bag started to sink. I had read about the giant water bug, but never seen one. Giant water bug is really the name of the creature, which is an enormous, heavy-bodied brown beetle. It eats insects, tadpoles, fish, and frogs. Its grasping forelegs are mighty and hooked inward. It seizes a victim with these legs, hugs it tight, and paralyzes it with enzymes injected during a vicious bite. That one bite is the only bite it ever takes. Through the puncture shoot the poisons that dissolve the victim's muscles and bones and organs, all but the skin, and through it the giant water bug sucks out the victim's body, reduced to a juice. This event is quite common in fresh water. The frog I saw was being sucked by a giant water bug. I had been kneeling on the island grass when the unrecognizable flap of frog skin settled on the creek bottom, swaying. I stood up and brushed the knees of my pants. I couldn't catch my breath. Of course, many carnivorous animals devour their prey alive. The usual method seems to be to subdue the victim by downing or grasping it so it can't flee, then eating it whole or in a series of bloody bites. Frogs eat everything whole, stuffing prey into their mouths with their thumbs. People have seen frogs with their wide jaws so full of live dragonflies they couldn't close them. Ants don't even have to catch their prey. In the spring they swarm over newly hatched, featherless birds in the nest and eat them, tiny bite by bite. That it's rough out there and chancy is no surprise. Every living thing is a survivor on a kind of extended emergency bivouac. But at the same time, we are also created. In the Quran, Allah asks, "The heaven and the earth, and all in between, thinkest thou I made them in jest?" It's a good question. What do we think of the created universe spanning an unthinkable void with an unthinkable profusion of forms? Or what do we think of nothingness, those sickening reaches of time in either direction? If the giant water bug was not made in jest, was it then made in earnest? Pascal uses a nice term to describe the notion of the creators, once having called forth the universe, turning his back to it. Deus absconditus. This is what we think happened. Was the sense of it there, and God absconded with it, ate it like a wolf who disappears round the edge of the house with Thanksgiving turkey? God is subtle, Einstein said, but not malicious. Again, Einstein said that nature conceals her mystery by means of her essential grandeur, not by her cunning. It could be that God has not absconded, but spread, as our vision and understanding of the universe have spread, to a fabric of spirit and sense so grand and subtle, so powerful in a new way, that we can only feel blindly of its hem. And making the thick darkness a swaddling band for the sea, God set bars and doors, and said, "Hitherto shalt thou come, but no further." But have we come even that far? Have we rowed out to the thick darkness? Or are we all playing Pinochle in the bottom of the boat? Cruelty is a mystery and the waste of pain. But if we describe a world to compass these things, a world that is a long brute game, then we bump against another mystery, the inrush of power and light, the canary that sings on the skull, unless all ages and races of men have been deluded by the same mass hypnotist who, there seems to be such a thing as beauty, a grace wholly gratuitous. About 5